Big shots by Jon Jones.
World in trouble here.
Gustafson's in trouble. That's
Jon
it.
Jones has
That's
regained the throne.
Wow.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to our YouTube channel, and I hope you guys are doing great. In today's video, we will be discussing the dirtiest and most controversial fighter to ever step foot inside the Octagon. Well, only one name springs to mind: Jon Bones Jones. Apart from being a great fighter in the UFC and possibly the best, Jones has been in the headlines for all the wrong reasons, and he has developed a penchant for courting trouble at every doorstep. His antics inside and outside the Octagon will be revealed in today's countdown, so let's get straight into it. Number 5 is in-ring controversies. Jon Jones is arguably one of the greatest MMA fighters of his generation, also being the greatest light heavyweight of the UFC. He has fought killers and great champs throughout his career, such as the likes of Daniel Cormier, Chael Sonnen, Rashad Evans, and many more, and emerged victorious every time. But there have been question marks over some of his victories inside the Octagon. His fight against Anthony Smith in UFC 235 for the defense of his light heavyweight belt brought the ugly side of Jones. In the middle of the fight was stopped as it was deemed that Jones used an illegal knee, which knocked Smith out for a while. The fight would have been stopped as a disqualification if Smith had not recovered from the blow or if he wasn't willing to continue. But Smith valiantly got up and asked the referee to continue the fight. Jones went on to win the fight with majority decision, but things could have been very different.
And I said it from the beginning, I wanted to win the title, and I know as well as anyone I could have sat there and taken the DQ win, but man, I want to win it, I don't want to steal it, you know?
He has also been seen attempting several eye pokes in his fights, which are always of bad taste for fans and opposing fighters. Not saying he deliberately does them, but if it happens in more than one fight, then it is a cause of concern. But his dirty streak inside the ring has cost him before as well.
I do poke people in the eyes, and it's very illegal, but I do it.
His only loss in MMA came against Matt Hamill at the start of his career in a fight he was largely dominating. Jones landed some illegal elbows to the face of his opponent. The fight was called off as a disqualification, handing Jones his first career loss.
Due to intentional elbows, there's been a disqualification of Jon Bones Jones.
His dirty moves inside the Octagon have had a negative view on his career by fans, but his moves outside the Octagon have also contributed to his image of being a controversial figure. Number 4, doping violations. Now to the part where Jones's real trouble began. Jones has been subject to numerous doping violations throughout his career. He has always been in loggerheads with the anti-doping agencies and the USADA. He tested positive for cocaine after his win over Daniel Cormier at UFC 182, due to which he admitted himself to rehab care. During that period, Jones found himself in deep trouble outside the Octagon and was stripped from his title, but we will get to that part later in the video. He would make his return against Ovince St. Preux in UFC 192 for the interim light heavyweight belt. He won the fight via decision and would then go on to face Daniel Cormier again for the light heavyweight championship at UFC 200 in what was set to be one of the UFC's greatest events. But days just before the match, news broke out that Jones had once again tested positive, this time for using estrogen blockers such as letrozole and clomiphene, and was pulled out of the main event. He received a 1-year suspension from fighting by USADA, but Jones argued that the substance found in his body was a dick pill he had purchased from one of the verified list of buyers. He also believed that the drug was listed as usable under the USADA drug pool. Ultimately, he had to serve the 1-year ban and was stripped of his interim title. On his return after serving the ban, many thought that Jones had put behind his troubles and was set to compete for the title again at UFC 214. In the fight, he defeated DC by finishing him in the 3rd round to become the light heavyweight champion again. But a few days later, Jones would find himself in more trouble as he once again tested positive for a banned substance, steroid turinabol, a drug used for high performance and quicker recovery. His test was a result of a pre-flight drug testing routine. He was later stripped of the title by the UFC, and the fight was deemed a no contest, allowing DC to retain the title. If only Jones could keep away from controversy, but there was more to follow. Number 3 is controversies outside the cage. Many fans in MMA have this notion that Jones' worst enemy is he himself. Jones has landed himself in hot water several times due to his off-the-cage misdemeanors. Many of those charges have been behind the wheel, where he has been fined and stopped multiple times due to his rash driving skills. In 2011, he was charged with a DWI where he crashed his Bentley into a pole in Binghamton, to which he pled guilty. He was given a $1,200 fine and a 6-month driving suspension, and also compulsory breathalyzer tests before driving the vehicle. Jones has also been charged for driving around with a suspended license in Albuquerque. But his major mishap came when he was arrested for a hit-and-run charge in the outskirts of Albuquerque, and in the process had also injured a pregnant woman in another vehicle. He was charged with fleeing the scene and having possession of drugs, such as marijuana and alcohol, inside the car. He got off with a bail of $2,500 and had to make several court appearances. The prosecutors decided that Jones would be under 18 months of probation, along with a hefty fine. He also had to attend 72 classes of kindergarten school, advising children to refrain from activities he had been a part of. The after effects of the incident later followed to the UFC, who stripped Jones of the title. Speaking on the incident, Jones admitted he had a lot of soul searching to do and he had let a lot of people down. During the period of his sentence, Jones would once again be charged for a driving related incident, where he was fined for drag racing, to which Jones got a serious message from the judge, asking him to take the warning seriously or things might get worse for him.
You and I both know that I freaking revved my engine at the red light and I never took off racing at all.
Jones would then keep a clean driving record going forward and would redeem himself in some way. But that was not the last of the Jones versus driving saga. In 2020, he was charged by the police in New Mexico in suspicion of holding a firearm from which gunshots were heard, and him also being somewhat intoxicated. Jones was then interrogated by the policeman on the scene. He admitted to having a drink of vodka before going behind the wheel. A sobriety check was done on Jones at the scene, determining the level of intoxication. It's been a rough journey for Bones, but credit to him for not letting his personal troubles impact him and still being able to carry on in the UFC as one of its greatest champions. Number 2. His love-hate relationship with the media. Jones, due to his controversies and troubles, had become somewhat of a target for the media. Prior to his UFC 232 title fight against Alexander Gustafsson, there was an incident during Media Day where a female reporter asked Jones why had he tested positive for a banned substance and why is he still allowed to compete in the UFC, to which Jones blatantly ignored the reporter's questions and told her to ask better questions. Even on social media, he receives a lot of hate for his past troubles, but Jones doesn't seem to let fans' opinion on it affect him too much, as he is still recognized as an incredible MMA fighter of the UFC. Number 1. His rivalry with Daniel Cormier. Jones versus DC was one of the greatest rivalries of the UFC the world has ever witnessed. The constant back and forth, the pure dislike both of them had for each other made it a riveting watch for fans, but their hate for each other was so bad that it escalated into personal matters. Jones was called by many the bad man of the UFC. Matters got a lot worse during their promotional tour for their light heavyweight title match, which was scheduled for UFC 178. When both fighters went face-to-face to weigh in, DC would shove Jones, to which Jones retaliated angrily by pushing the stand-in host of the ceremony and going after DC, which led to a melee that would involve several people trying to separate both the fighters. Jones was later fined $50,000 by the Nevada Athletic Commission. He was also subjected to 40 hours of community service for his actions during the scuffle. The scuffle turned out to be a double whammy for Jones, as it led to Nike canceling its sponsorship deal with Jones. Wondering what might be if Jones could have held himself back in such moments. Jon Jones is one of the pound-for-pound greatest MMA athletes of the UFC, and his accomplishments speak for itself. But fans and people still regard him as the most controversial and dirtiest MMA fighter of all time due to his well-publicized issues inside and outside the Octagon. Alright, and by this we have come to the end of our video today, but before leaving we would like to know, do you think Jones is the dirtiest MMA fighter of all time? Why is he such a controversial figure? Do you regard him as one of the greatest MMA fighters, even after all his doping violations and other controversies? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to share, like, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time.